Well, guys, welcome. Here we are. This is a session. I've got my friend James. Hey, James.
How's it going?
Good. And I thought we'd just have a little bit of a conversation. Many of you won't know who James is. Never met him before. So I thought I'd let James introduce himself and tell us a bit about himself.
Hi, everybody. I'm James Nichols. You'll probably often hear me referred to as Jimmy on occasion, depending on who you're around. I became interested in sound at a really young age. I actually used to take cardboard boxes and string them together with bits of string. So I'd have a cardboard box for an amplifier and a cardboard box for a mixer, and I just connect them all with bits of string. So I became very interested in technical things early on, and then that just continued to evolve as time went on, and it's kind of allowed me the ability to do what I do now, which is production manager for Jeremy Riddle and Stephanie Gretzinger currently, and then I do occasionally some contract project management and production management work for different events like the Jesus Image Group, which has a yearly conference with Michael Koulianos and those guys. Do some stuff with the Send. Worked with the David Sent people, which is actually where I met Matt, and then also do contract consulting for churches all the way from 150 people up to 5,000, 10,000 seats. So
Amazing. So this kind of background, I'm assuming this started because you were passionate about church, and therefore you ended up as a young kind of teenager helping in a church. Or tell us about that kind of idea.
yeah, actually, that's a really funny story. I wasn't really an avid churchgoer as a young boy. My parents were what I call priesters, so Christmas and Easter attenders. But I had a homeschool group that I was attending when I was younger, and they went to church quite often, so I started tagging along with them. And before you know it, I was volunteering behind the soundboard at the youth group, and that grew. And I think by the time I was probably 15 years old, I think I was running sound for the main circuit. So kind of organizing all that. So yeah, my passion for music and my musicianship definitely led to my passion for how it's supposed to sound, making sure all the instruments got communicated. And I basically learned that in a church environment. Yeah, so
Amazing. It's amazing. Now, we've worked together on many occasions, but actually, in the conversations we've had, it's so different. You were talking around the club in Detroit and how you approach kind of mixing a band, a club in Detroit, and then how do you approach a session with Jeremy? Why don't you talk a little bit around, what makes it different?
yeah, I mean, for sure. We can all have our own opinions, I think, about how things are supposed to sound, and a lot of them are great. And I think everybody has their own nuance to how something should sound. But I think the major difference when it comes to worship is it's not even necessarily about the nuances of how it sounds or how you're setting up your console or any of that. I think it really comes down to who you are and your approach from a personal perspective in your relationship with the Lord. I think that's probably the most important thing. And honestly, I think that's what people have told me has gotten me where I am is, a lot of people, once in a while I've had people say, not the best mix engineer, but, we love your heart and we love what you bring to the table. So hopefully since then I've become a much better mix engineer. And that's also why I'm asked to these events and that type of thing. But early on, it was definitely like, no, we want James, we want Jimmy around because we know his heart, we know his passion for the Lord, and that's what we want. That we want that person to be with us, not just somebody who can, push buttons and turn dials kind of thing.
I think that's fantastic. In the UK, we have a lot of people who, especially this conference, a lot of people who have a church of 50 people, church of 150, maybe up to a couple of hundred, but that's an average sized church.
Hmm.
So how should what's your mindset and how will you approach? You're running sound, and it may be very simple, 50 people, but what's the heart? What are we approaching when we come to do that kind of thing?
Yeah, I think the most important thing is, are we able to communicate what's happening on the stage and what the Lord is doing in the room? I think you're a part of the band. You are communicating what's going on. You're actually sometimes I believe a louder voice than some of the band, because if somebody's playing piano and somebody's playing guitar and the guitar player stops and nobody's turned up the piano to fill the space, that's all in your hands. I mean, you're essentially responsible for communicating what's happening in the atmosphere.
Hmm.
And I mean, that was a large part of what I did with Jeremy very, very early on when we first started working together. Is he knew that there was something that was different in happening in the room when I ran sound versus when somebody else would do it, and that was because I was staying very in touch with what I feel like the Lord was wanting to say, and whether that's bringing up the pads louder in one section, or you know pulling down something to allow something else to shine or move, or being very dynamic with the mix. Does it need to feel small and intimate so people will lean into what you're doing, or does it need to be loud and explosive so that people can really feel the power and sort of the
Hmm.
almighty God in the room? I think that's extremely important, and whatever you're given, whether it's a guy with an acoustic guitar and a vocal or a full on band, making sure that that's communicated in the best way possible, and that you're representing that well, I think is the most important thing.
I love that. I look at it, I talk around spiritual temperature quite a lot, and how can you
Mm-hmm.
look out across the room and kind of see what the Spirit's doing. I had a discussion with a lady in a church pre lockdown, so probably February, and we were talking about volume, and she said it's louder today. And I said, yeah, but can you not see what the Spirit's doing? And she looked at me as if I'd lost the plot. And I'm going, yeah, but look around the room. People are engaging in a fresh way. If I turn it down a bit, oh, people have stopped engaging. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, it's exactly that. How do we see what the spirit's doing and use that as our building block? I'm not saying that means you've got carte blanche kind of way you can do anything, not at all. But how do we steer or see? Okay, God, what are you saying to the people right now? Where is your heart for this time right now? So therefore,
Yeah,
what do we need to do?
exactly. Yeah, that's so true. The volume issue, I think, is really interesting, because you almost can watch people engage and disengage depending on the levels and things that are going on. And I mean, to get slight touch on the technical, I think that's why it is important to really understand your craft, because we don't want harsh loud, we don't want harsh volume, we don't want
Mm,
something that's going to disconnect people. But if you have a great mix that you can turn up and people can engage even deeper into what's going on, that is going to do powerful things in a room that would never be able to be done before, if the mix wasn't approached from a good perspective. And on the counter, if you have the ability to have clarity that you can turn something down in a small moment, and have people really lean in and connect, like almost be forced to have to connect with what's going on in the room because of the levels that you're using. I mean, it can be extremely powerful techniques to be used.
yeah, and I think, especially having worked with yourself and Jeremy a little bit, just understanding because he's coming from a worship stance where there is space. There's space for
Hmm.
the spirit to move, and that might be different to some people in their churches. But where there is space, is going. We don't really have a running order at this point, and we're just gonna see where the spirit takes us. And
Yep.
I've seen that, and that definitely makes you think in a different way because you need to be one eye on the board and the band, and one eye on the spirit.
Yep. Yep. It's
Uh,
so
uh,
true.
and that brings us challenge because you can nearly slip too far into thinking, what's the right thing for me to do? Am I being professional if I'm worshipping? Do you understand what I mean? How do I be 100% fixed to my role I'm doing, but at the same time really wanting to engage with God? And there's the line. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, we have a role to fill. We're here on earth to do things. And I think in nature of connecting with God is fulfilling that role. I mean, you can kind of take some chapters out of worship leaders' books, right? Like, worship leaders will always say your time to worship is not necessarily the time that you're leading on stage. Your
Mm,
job there is to minister to the Lord and to lead
mm,
people into an experience, right? I think you can take that from the same role as an operator. You know, if you're not filled up, ready to go when you step up to the soundboard, then you need to take more time on your own preparing, because your job there, your role there is to focus on what God is doing in the room and make sure that that's being communicated. And you should almost have a sense of what's going to happen before you get there, because God's going to speak to you about that, you know? And that way you can stay focused on making sure you're actually performing your role well. You know, if you're a musician and you're off, oh, this is the first time I've, you know, really played this song, and oh my gosh, the spirit's moving, and oh, I've lost my focus now because I'm too focused on what I feel like the Lord's saying, and now I don't know the notes. You know, the same thing applies to being a great engineer. You can prepare yourself spiritually just as much as you can prepare yourself technically for something. So you're aware of what God is doing in the room, but you're not so distracted by it that you're not able to perform your role in an excellent way.
wow, I love that. How do we do that? I think my question is actually, let's take a real sound check, and we all turn up on a Sunday morning and we're all tired and we've had children up all night and life. How in reality, how do we not start shouting at the band? What do we do to get to that point where the service starts wanting to worship and not just strangle the drummer because he doesn't play in time?
Yeah.
What can we do?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think this starts in preparation. One of the first things that I do when I am engaging in some sort of consultation with the church is I get the sound people and I get the musicians in the same room and we have a conversation. We learn about each other. We understand what each other needs. You know, it doesn't make sense for a sound engineer to be yelling at the drummer if they've never sat down together, got to know each other, and know how to support one another. You know. So even before we get together there on a Sunday morning, I think it's important for the sound engineers to know their musicians really well. Like I said, you're part of the band. You should feel as part of the
Mm,
band as, you know, the background singers or the lead guitar player, or, you know, even the lead, you know, worshiper themselves. Like, you should feel it as part of that, and the band should help you feel that way. So you're entering into a conversation with them as opposed to like, don't play the snare so loud. You know, it's more like, hey, here's what I'm dealing with. Like, let's talk about this. You know, the drummer wants to feel like he can express himself. That's, you know, that's part of the reason why we have a lot of loud drummers. You know, they get into it and they want to feel and express. But what are some ways that we can talk about that and say, how can I help you feel like you're able to express and worship in a way that helps me, and doesn't mean that I have to run it at 110 dB just to get the vocal over the snare drum, you know? So, you know,
uh,
having that relationship ahead of time means when you come in on a Sunday morning, you know, you can pray together, feel connected, and go out there and accomplish something great.
yeah, I like that. How do we get together with the band and actually build friendship much more than we're here to do a job on a Sunday?
Yep, exactly.
I had a friend who once said to me, on a Sunday, do whatever it takes to deliver Sunday. Have an argument about it on Monday morning. Have a punch up the next day. What I mean is, just get on with it. Let's make it incredible. And then
Yep,
if constructive kind of going forward and going to the drummer, oi, let's not do that again. But that's good. We can all learn from that. That's part of the joys of working in church. And we're always going to be doing new things. The worship leader
yep,
suddenly appears with a third drum kit one week. It's like, okay, cool, let's make this work. Tomorrow, what the heck? What is that? That doesn't work. But that's
yep.
part of that. And then on a practical level, any practical things you do when working with a band, any thought process in any quick little tips you've got, maybe technical or not, in how do I do something different just to be ready for worship?
Yeah. Gosh, man, I feel like I keep driving this home, but it's preparation, man. I mean, like, it doesn't matter if I'm, you know, going to be stepping into a 100-person church or I'm on my way to do a 3-day, 80,000 seat stadium event. You know, I've got my laptop. I'm prepping my shows. I'm reviewing my input list. I'm checking to make sure that I have my vocal chain set properly for whatever leaders are going to be there. I'm reviewing my mixes. You know, one of the things I did learn very, very early on is this idea of bringing excellence, right? Like, we can all bring heart. We all know, that we can bring that, but there is that level of excellence that we're called to. We're called to be the best. And part of, or a lot of that, I would say, is in your preparation. Jeremy doesn't want to stand around waiting on stage while I'm loading up mixes that, aren't going to work for that day, or waiting around for me to patch things that I should have had patched and known about, when I got an input list weeks before for the event. And in the same thing, when I walk into a 100-seat church, I should know what console am I using. What does the band look like? What's the temperature going to be in the room? What denomination church is it even? What is their go-to? What are they used to? And just raising the level of that. I think it does come down to preparation. You're going to feel so confident when you step up to a console, knowing that information and knowing that you're not sort of practicing on the spot. You're confident in delivering what you have to offer, and then that's when the creativity can really begin to sit in. I don't passively mix. I don't even passively mix monitors. There's things you can do when you're mixing monitors, and it's not just waiting around for somebody to go, oh, I need more snare drum, or turn the bass down, or more reverb, or whatever. You can actively be doing that for the musicians in their ears. Again, listening to what the Spirit's doing and responding to what the band is doing. If it's a down moment and it's just pads and pianos, like, make sure everybody has that in their ears. Make sure they can hear what's going on, and then bring things in and out subtly as necessary. You might have a few musicians who might be like, no, don't change anything in my mix. I totally get that. But, I think you'll find that more musicians than not respond to an active approach to what you're doing. And that comes from being prepared and confident and calm when you step up to the console and you're able to actually perform your role.
But I also think as you start to get to know in your local church with 3 or 4 worship leaders, you get to know what they all like in their ears if you're mixing ears for them. You get to know that this one really likes click hard left, and it's like, that makes no sense, but cool. If that's what you want, that's what we're going to do.
Yep. Yeah, for sure.
And that's part of the relationship, working with, okay, so we get to half-time through church, or partway through at the preach, maybe the drummer send you a quick text message, can I have more of this? And you're asking, it's all about feedback and how do we work together with the band to actually go, can we make this better for you? Because we're all here to serve, and reality is we're all here to help the congregation engage with Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And if the congregation aren't able to engage with Jesus, we might as well go home or go to the pub.
Right. Well, and I think it's the same thing from a monitor's perspective. I'm very passionate about monitors because I want it to feel inspirational. You want to feel like it's not just like, oh, I got it. Oh, it works. I can hear what I need to. I don't think it should be like that. I think it should feel polished and great in the ears so that you can feel inspired by what God's doing. You can hear everybody around you, and that creative element can be, available to follow what the Lord is doing.
James, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. I love that phrase. How can we let the creativity of God flow by making it the best experience for the musicians as well as in the room, to let them be on their best way forward as we journey in whatever journey the worship's taken us that day.
Absolutely.
Hey, James, it's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
This has been a great session. Please feel free to reach out to me over the next couple of days and we'll carry this conversation on. Thanks, guys.